Yo guys, it's JJ here, and of course by title of the video, you guys have come here to watch how to make a Utopia type beat, of course for yours truly, Travis LaFlame Scott. So let's get into this. First of all, I'm gonna tell you now, this is easily one of the best beats I've made in a while. I really love it. I really think it goes great, and I can kind of hear the whole escape plan flow all over this. Escape plan being one of Travis's songs, if you're not really aware. However, first of all, we got another instance of Analog Lab 5 with the preset Game Boy organ. And as you can see, very simple pattern, very repetitive, but it does the job really well because we want something that Travis can really flow over and do that really nice kind of flow. So first of all, as you can see, it's really just a 2-bar loop, just loops over and over, but I'm gonna walk you guys through it right now. Very simple. I just started off by laying down this note, F sharp, and honestly, it's really as simple as this. I felt, let me just see what it sounds like playing these notes in this order. Thought it sounded good, but by the end of the 2-bar, like, okay, I need some variation. I need something to change. So all I actually did was just add an F sharp on top, so they play at the same time, 1 octave here and 1 octave there, and it sounded really good, so I kept it like that. Honestly, simple, don't overthink it. Once I did that, I just highlighted this track and I click Control B, and as you can see, copy and paste it over. But last but not least, all I did was click Alt R, and then that allowed me to randomize my velocity, as you can see, making it sound more human, more authentic. But without further ado, this is what the first part of the melody sounds like. And there you have it. Very nice, very simple, and catchy. As for effects, honestly, it was quite simple. A very basic EQ, cutting out a frequency I wasn't a fan of, and then a fair amount of reverb. That's all it really was. And on top of that, I stereo separated this around 22%. Next up, we got ourselves another instance of Analog Lab 5, and I'm using a preset called Candy, and this is a bass preset. As you can see, this is a nice pattern I've got going. It's very simple, but let me go through it. As you guys can see, I'm essentially just following the root notes, creating a very normal bounce, sort of like an 808 bounce, as you can see from the first 2-bar. Then I kind of just switched it up by adding an extra note here, an extra note here, and then just added these nice little like rhythmic notes that give it a bit more of a bounce in my opinion, so I thought it sounded really dope. And last but not least, I had this nice little thing going here just to give it a bit of a bounce to wrap up the 8-bar. As you can see, plays in the last little half of that 8-bar, so nice way to end the bass line. And before I play the bass line, just when you hear it, you'll hear it, it's kind of like a plucked bass, gives it a lot of bounce, so it really does help with the track and how great it sounds already, even though we're only one melody in. But take my word for it. So without further ado, this is what the melodies now sound like together. And there you have it. So as for effects for the bass, all we've actually got is just a beefy preset from Decapitator, and that's all I actually put on. Nothing less, nothing more. It did the job well, so don't overcomplicate it. As you can see, from only these 2 melodic components, we already have a great flow, a great bounce, so the rest of this is going to be pretty heat. And Travis, of course, LaFlame, going to be dropping that heat. Next up, the sound that we got going is actually a 1-shot, and it's from the producer grind kit called Cadence, and it's a 1-shot called Clouds. It's in the pluck shot, and it's obviously on C. As you can see, not really done much to it. However, from what you can see from the pattern, I've got this nice little kind of arp thing going, I guess you could call it. And as seen, this repeats literally every beat. As you can see, this literally repeats every single bar. Kept it quite simple. And honestly, when it came to the notes, it wasn't a music theory thing. I just said, let me play what sounds good. Let me see what it sounds like. And I really like this kind of pattern. As you can see, just jumps up and then this nice kind of elevating a note and then dropping back down. And as you can see real quick, between the G sharp and the F sharp, it's like this note instantly leads back into this. And it gives it a nice little bit of rhythm. And once I did that, all I had to do was just right click, highlight, and then Control B to copy and paste it over. And then last but not least, all I had to do here is click Alt R and randomize the velocity because we want this to sound human, even though it's kind of a synthetic track and synthetic is assumed with robots, so counterintuitive, you may say so. However, randomize your velocities. Now this is what the melodies sound like together. And there you have it. Sounds super dope. This nice little arp rhythm has got going. I thought it complemented the melody and the bass line super well. As for effects, for this part of the melody, as you can see, we've got an EQ, quite basic, calling off a few highs and a lot of the lows. And now you may be thinking, why the heck did I actually just blast this to the top? Honestly, the sound is very quiet, even when I use the mixing knob. So I thought, let me just use the EQ to actually help increase the volume. Next up, I got myself a preset called Winters from Portal, and if I'm not mistaken, it's from the Ethereal Bank by this person here. Shout out to him. And I don't know if you heard it properly, but if you rewind that melody, the clouds pluck that I used, this portal gives it a bit of like a little bit of texture in the back. It was, as you can see, not very wet, so it was a nice little bit of a component, a bit of ear candy you could call it. And then last but not least, reverb, because we need that ambience, we need that stereo to be created, we need it to be whole. And as for stereo separation, I stereo separated this around 62% just to widen the sound, because it's like an arc, so I don't want it to be really in your face, but it's doing the job. Now, last but not least, for the melody, we got ourselves an instance of Expand 2, and I'm using a preset called the Ocarina, like from, you know, Legend of Zelda, and it's under the ethnic bank, as you can see. And for the pattern, this was pretty much like a counter melody, or like the lead melody, you may even call it. Very simple, very straightforward. All I did was have this nice little cascading effect with the flute and let it play for a long time, because honestly, it actually went so hard when I finished the beat and everything. I was like, this is dope. And then just took it back up the ladder again. Very simple melody, not overthinking it, not overcomplicating it, and that's how you really get the best production out of yourself. Not just my thing, this goes to any producer, any genre of rap, I think maybe you could apply it outside of rap, I'm not too sure about that, but keeping it simple takes you so far. So without further ado, and with all my babbling, this is what the flute sounds like with the whole melody. And there you have it. Sounds super dope. I thought it was pretty fire. As for effects, as you guys can see, I've just used a very basic EQ, yet again, cutting off all the lows and highs, then whacking on the fruity chorus just to give the sound a bit more of like a alienish feel. I don't know how to really describe it, but it sounded really nice. And then on top of that, a fair amount of reverb, keeping it a bit heavy because I wanted the flute to be softened out a bit with the reverb, which explains why the mix is a bit high. And then before we get onto the drums, there's just a tiny bit more, but I wouldn't call this the melody. It's more just less accents and textures. And then I stereo separated like 40%. But now, before we move on to the drums, I want to take you guys real quick through my textures and accents that I added to the melody. Felt like this gave it a bit more movement. It made the whole beat sound better overall, and it just made it flow really nicely. So without further ado, let me show you. First of all, as you can see, I've got this nice little perk loop here, and I got it from the producer grind cadence. Again, as you guys can see, I've just used this nice little perk loop, and I've just let it play again over the 8-bar course. Really nice, very simple. As for effects, I've whacked on this like really tiny telephone EQ because I wanted to cut out a lot of the frequencies. I wanted this perk loop to be more of a textural element really than just a loop, so that's why I did this. And then I added some heavy reverb, and I mean really heavy reverb, as you can see here, and then stereo separated this to 100% as well. Next up, we got ourselves the accents, of course, and as you can see, we've got ourselves one that kind of acts like a crash, but it really does fit the aesthetic of the beat. And I've got another accent right here, but this one, as you can see from double clicking, I reversed it and took it down a whole octave, which is 12 semitones. I'll take you guys through the effect, but honestly, it's as simple as I added a delay, an EQ, and a reverb, as you can see from here and here. And all I did on top of that to add a little bit of movement and make the sample even better, I stereo separated these to the max again. As well as that, I panned the crash kind of effect towards my left ear, and I used the riser effect to my right ear by panning it to the right. And when you hear this with headphones, I'm telling you now, it does take it a long way in my opinion. Gives it a nice little bit of fluidity, and it just makes producers want to use your loops more if you are making a loop, for example, or makes artists want to use your beat much more because it's fire. Last part of the actual melody is I rendered out the whole loop, and then as well as that, I just took it down 2 semitones, and now we're gonna hear the full final thing. So before I play you the melody, now you know it's been taken down 2 semitones. This scale has now shifted from an F sharp minor to an E minor. Simple as, and this is the full melody. And there you have it, the full melody slash sample. So let's get into these drums. So first of all, we've of course got ourselves a nice little clap pattern, but I used a snare instead because I thought this beat sounded so good. I was like, let me get some nice little bit of sharpness coming through. So chose a snare over a clap. And as you can see, all I did, very basic clap pattern, and then added a few notes here and here and here because gave it a bit more bounce, a bit more creativity. So what's the harm? And without further ado, this is what the drum sounds like. Now, next up, we got ourselves a hi-hat pattern, and I will admit, it's a bit complicated. Looking back at it, very much so, but let me walk you through it. First of all, I clicked on the quarter step tool, changed to paintbrush, and then I painted in these nice little rolls. And to be honest, this one's just pitch change. And as you can see here, I've done a nice little quarter roll, but I right click the velocity to kind of change it, make it seem like it's like gliding into it, and added a nice half step roll, quarter step roll, more quarter step rolls. And then I, again, just as you can see, played with the pitch and got this nice little pattern going. And then of course, just copy and pasted it over. So without further ado, this is what the drums sound like. And there you have it. And of course, next up, we got ourselves the 808 pattern. And as you can see, I went kind of crazy with it, but not too much. Just added a few rolls again. And now onto the 808 pattern. And as you can see, it's an E minor because remember, we took everything down to semitones. So as you can see, the pattern's quite simple. So as you can see, the pattern's not really that simple, but really dope. And just added a nice little few rolls, a few little bit of accent snares here. But overall, the bounce of the 808 pattern is essentially very the same as the bass. As you can see from here, here and here, and it kind of just runs along the whole thing, but then just add a bit of variation, a few transitional notes, if you may call them that. And last but not least, 3 words: max your 808s. Don't forget that. Max the velocity always. Control A for highlighting everything, and then use your scroller wheel to max the velocity. It really takes it a long way. So without further ado, this is now what the drum pattern sounds like. There you have it. Next up, of course, we got a kick pattern. As you can see, just follows the drum notes. However, any of the rolls or transitional notes that I called on earlier, I just removed the kick for that. So kick essentially is the same, and matches the velocity of the kick as well, because you want that stuff to be punching through the speaker. That's what the whole point of rap is, in my opinion. When it comes to trap, you want that bass to be punching and hitting different, so always match your velocities. And then last but not least, we got ourselves the open hat. As you can see, repeats every 2 bar, and then I just control B to copy and paste it over. So without further ado, this is what the full drum pattern sounds like. And there you have it. So you've now officially made it to the end of the video. I really appreciate you guys for watching. Hope you've enjoyed it. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.